Eamon, we had an interesting day in the Special Criminal Court, actually just an afternoon, and in the Special Criminal Court this week, and there was all sorts of characters that sort of went through in various stages of cases against them. We were there for what was due to be the opening of the trial, the drug trial against James Leen from Kerry, and we've already seen Nathan MacDonald plead guilty to his role in the attempted shipment of crystal meth from Kerry through the Port of Cork to Australia. Lean's trial was due to get underway. It was supposed to last about 5 weeks, but it was adjourned. We heard a little bit of evidence having said that, but the reason it was adjourned was because his senior counsel, Colin Smith, had requested that he just sort of basically said he was overwhelmed with the amount of sort of material, phone data, etc., that he had to go through, and he wanted to analyse it. And he said he wasn't in a position to defend his client.
Yeah, he actually mentioned there was 313 pages of documents in disclosure that they had gotten. And that, again, it was all phone evidence. So there's a number of these phones that were confiscated from various people, including, I think, 3 of them that were connected with James Leen. And there were, as it was put in court, there were calls between the defendant, James Leen, and other individuals and criminal organisations, and that the phone evidence is fundamental to the entire case, and it stands or falls on that. And that his defence counsel, Colin Smith, then was kind of making the point that there were 3 machines involved. There was the machine that were the drugs in, and there were 2 other machines. One of them was described, I think, as an AS-55 machine for something to do with scrap metal, and a compost machine for food production. And these are big industrial machines. They're, used by, they're not something that you'd have in your shed for a bit of garden work or anything like that. These are full industrial machines. And he said, he's connected with those, and that'll show that. But in the machine that the drugs were found in, that he had no connection with. And this is his defence counsel was making this point, and they wanted more time to get their own specialist expert to analyse all this kind of phone evidence, all this material, and that they'd have to download it all, which they haven't been able to, he said, because such was the size of the files, and that this expert then would use their own algorithms or computer program or whatever to kind of glean the information that they wanted to show that their client, James Leen, had no connection with the drugs or the machine in which the 564 kilograms of methamphetamine were found back in, when was it, in February 24?
Yeah, so basically what he's saying is he is connected, he's admitting his connection to this recycling of scrap metal machine. He's admitting his connection with the compost machine, which was to be used for food production in a restaurant. And both of those, he said, were for use at Ballyseedy. But he is not connected, he's claiming, to the machine that the drugs were found in at Ballyseedy. So it's essentially, he's pleaded not guilty at this point.
Yeah.
So this is going to be his defence. The phones were his phones and a guy called John McGrath, and we've heard about him before. He is somebody who has passed away, and he would have been accused of being the sort of money launderer involved in this. He set up companies and was involved in the sort of the money behind all this. And I think Smith said in court that 25% of the material that would be sort of the raw data that would be important in the case was on his phone, McGrath's.
Yeah, and initially it was explained that the state had an idea that, whatever 3/4 of this material that was on McGrath's phone, there was actually privacy concerns attached to them, on which they weren't going to use in evidence and they weren't going to disclose to the defence. But when they reviewed the case, I suppose coming closer to trial, they decided then that these should have been allowed. And that and this is what was basically handed over to the defence, I think, and the defence were saying that they only got it on the 26th of September. The counsel for the Director of Public Prosecution seemed to say, well, actually, no, we sent it in July, and there was a bit of admonishment, I think, from one of the judges as well, that they felt there had been issues before about the timely kind of filing of disclosure documents and so on, and so they felt that I suppose they kind of eventually they did agree with the application looking for the adjournment because Colin Smith said that they weren't in a position to ensure a fair trial, so they couldn't defend the case as it was. And so I suppose that the judges in a case like this are also looking to make sure that, one, there is a fair trial, two, that there isn't going to be any kind of element of appeal left over, that they have to do they have to do it properly. So they were asking, like, well, how long is this going to take? Which I thought was a bit surprising, that they were saying, well, they can't get the expert to look at it until sometime in December, because they have to come and physically sit in presumably a room in a Garda station in Ireland, because these phones are actual physical evidence.
So what is this expert doing? Because they were talking about him having to physically be there for 6 days to download the material, is it?
And then
he has to do that, this expert.
And then it's going to take another 6 weeks, it's another 3 months, 12 weeks it was going to be then before the expert would be able to kind of furnish a report to the court. So they're obviously going to, whatever information they're going to download, they're going to, I suppose, put it through their analytical systems, their algorithms, their computer programs.
What would they be looking for? The content of the messages, because surely the defence have that.
Well, if you look at some of these phone records, and there was a case where I think it was a case involving an Irish tarmac crew in Sweden, and the Swedish, in the way they do business in the courts, I got to see everything, and there was a Cellbrite, a download of one of the phones. Cellbrite is this sometimes controversial software because it was made by an Israeli firm, but it is widely used now, and I think its use has been defended by the previous Garda Commissioner Drew Harris, who said, look, it's an important tool in the toolbox for any investigators. And you can see a lot of things like, if you're writing your shopping list, that's just going to appear as normal. I think in terms of numbers and contacting and how long you're on, I mean, a lot of that is very difficult for humans to read, because it's just simply a load of numbers, whereas you can set up an algorithm to find out how many times where you're contacting this person, and did you do it in the week before this arrived or that arrived. So presumably that's what they're getting at. I've no idea. I mean, they don't know what they're going to find in the phone data either. So
they have been given this data, which by the prosecution, which is going to essentially make up the case against James Leen. It's all there on the phones, they pretty much said, right? So that is going to be relating to the shipping of the drug, because at one point he looked his senior counsel Smith was talking about making an application in relation to the shipping of the third container, which he said he'd nothing to do with, and that was the container that the drugs were found in, that had been stored in Ballyseedy. And I think the prosecution said that there was no need for him to be interested in the shipping of that container if he was claiming he had,
nothing to do with it.
They were looking for a marine expert to go through that.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, that was left aside.
Yeah, well, they were looking for an extension of free legal aid then to cover an expert to do that as well. And I mean, I suppose that they were making the point, I think, wasn't the term they used as a conflagration of facts on the behalf of the prosecution, and that they were basically mixing up their facts and getting it wrong. And they feel that this data will show, the data from the phones will show that their client was
not involved
was not involved in any way with the machine that had the drugs in it. And as for the shipping, I guess that's, again, they want to kind of go through every detail. Like, I mean, in a case such as this, they are going to go through every detail they can, as much as they can. Like, it seems to be a huge amount of material. You're talking about 313 pages being, in this most recent disclosure.
It's kind of unusual, though. Like, I think, when you see a trial is due to go ahead, so the court has set aside that time for the trial. The special court, as we know, is very busy, and given the amount of cases that went through it there the other day, well, we were there even in the afternoon, it just shows how busy it is. But so they don't like moving a trial or adjourning a trial when it's set down.
No, it is unusual. But it happens. And I mean, earlier in the morning, before you arrived at court, I was in the Central Criminal Court trying to track a couple of murder cases that are coming up. And Paul McDermott, who's kind of basically the most senior judge, and who's basically doing the trial management, and he was tearing strips off counsel over not being ready and warning them that is listed for a mention, and he wanted to hear progress in this case, or before he would list a trial date, and basically complaining about I suppose the lack of support maybe some of the lawyers themselves are getting from outside authorities, in terms of, reports, and whether it's like experts' reports or whether it's, doctors' reports or medical, psychiatric and so, all of that kind of stuff is just taking, it was delaying things bit by bit to a point where sometimes a case that was generally agreed to go ahead in a certain date, that 7 months later, they still haven't got their pre-trial work done. And, there's a frustration. Well, not a frustration, but he's trying to push everything on as best they can. So to see that in the special criminal court, I guess, it was a bit surprising.
It's surprising.
It was expected.
And you've everybody there. Like, you have all the guards involved in this. And this was really was heavily a locally investigated case. And you had an awful lot of detectives and presume different ranking guards up for the opening, and presumably having sort of squared off the weeks ahead.
Yeah, and 3 High Court judges there as well. Like, and I'd stand on the list as 4 to 6 weeks. But I mean, they all work. All judges work kind of with sort of, standby cases in their diary, and they'll have 3 or 4 for every one, like, that they're actually supposed to be doing. So if one fails, they can go to the next one. If they're not ready, they'll go to the third one, and so on.
No doubt.
They won't waste their time in that sense. But
now, James Leen looked different, didn't he, to what photograph we've seen of him? Gone is the beard. He was quite clean.
Yeah, we had to do a bit of a double take.
Yeah.
That's who it was, because people were in and out of the box yesterday, so it took a minute to.
He looked a bit different to me, and he had, I think his father was there to support him.
It was Billy, the former councillor in the area, who was chatting away to him.
He was chatting away to him during it. But ultimately, this adjournment has been given, but its circumstances don't change because he's in custody.
Yeah, he's been in custody since February 24, isn't it? So he's been quite some time in there now.
Yeah.
And of course, his co-accused who pleaded guilty is already into his 12-year sentence.
Nathan MacDonald. Yeah. So, and apart from that, there was, like, everybody was ready to go. But there you go. So these things happen. Now, we're really looking at March for this trial, do you think?
Yeah, it was 3 months. It's going to be, because I mean, like, it's going to be back for mention on the very last day of term. I think it's the 18th of December. They mentioned
the 20th.
And that it would be that time. I think it's in December before the expert can actually do his week of work or her week of work.
And the judges want to know at that stage that they
want to know that that's
done.
Happened at least, so that they can not take up a date that isn't going to happen again.
So, and I mean, look, that was seen as a kind of there was a good bit of backslapping in relation to getting that adjournment, but you did kind of wonder, it isn't really going to change anything. It's just delaying stuff so further investigations can be done on this phone matter. So who else was up? We had a couple of other cases that we thought were interesting.
Yeah, no, I had to do some rapid Googling, I think, on the phone there during court, because there was some, like, there's been so many, what would you say, like, really high profile drug importation cases like the one in Ballyseedy, and and stuff that's of the scale or close to the scale of the MV Matthew, which is now done and dusted. So you had, there was 2 of them, there was a couple of individuals there yesterday that would have been connected to some fairly large seizures. So one of them was the Trabgumna Pier one, and that was in March 2024.
Is that in Cork?
And that was Cork, and there was an attempt to pick up drugs at sea, and these were later found washed up in Denmark. And so we had a Spanish gentleman, he was there, and he's kind of fleece and jacket, and there was it was all done very slowly because there was an interpreter. That was Angel Saran Padilla. His address was Malaga. And basically, they were asking for a date back to the 17th of October, and it's actually been put back now to the 20th of October.
How much drugs were washed up in Denmark?
It was, give me a sec.
Multi-millions.
It was multi-millions. It was 60 million, 850 kilos, just over or around 60 million.
Of coke.
Different of cocaine, yeah. And it was, and this is the consignment, because it coincided with the tracking of this ship called the Cool Explorer, which had been off Land's End, and that the allegation or what we've heard so far in court, it was that this rib boat that was piloted by members of this gang had gone out to try and meet up with it. Now, I think there's 7 are up for sentence now on the 20th of October, including the gentleman who was there yesterday, Mr. Padilla. So, and there's another 3 that have gone for trial. That's not going to happen until next year. I think it's in June it's listed for, so it's a good bit away.
So
and there's one Irishman who's involved in that.
Were they arrested at sea on the rib, or were they?
No, they were seen acting suspiciously,
right.
and there was a camper van and an articulated truck, and they were trying to load this boat back on, and there was. I think, again, a full analysis of the phones. There was lots of devices found. There was the 10 arrests. And again, like, you know, and it shows you kind of the whole international level, like, of what's going on. I mean, with Palisidi, the Sinaloa cartel, and Maurice O'Shea's Salazar, and, you know, you got the Cologne, Mexico, Barcelona link going on. And then with this one and the Drogumna Pier one, or the Cool Explorer might be the easier way to describe it.
Yeah.
Like, again, you had multinational, like you have Bosnians, you have Spanish, you have Irish. And again, there was another gentleman there as well, Gary Monks, for a different case again involving a ship called the MV Royal. And that was in January of this year. And if you remember, there was a case, it seemed a bit strange at the time that there was a number of people arrested, including separately a couple of people off a boat that was anchored in the Shannon Estuary. And so Gary Monks and 2 other men, Conor Costello and Ryan Watson, have all pleaded guilty at this stage. And they were... they're believed to be part of a landing party that they were there to recover drugs. Now, they've pleaded guilty to conspiring to conspiring to import drugs into this jurisdiction, but no drugs were actually found. So again, there's obviously going to be some similarities to the case involving the people surrounding the attempted to drop.
Well, we didn't get the drugs in Cork; they did wash up in Denmark. That's suspected.
What's suspected that came off the ship called the Cool Explorer, those drugs ended up in Denmark, they believe, because it matched. There was mini GPS trackers on the actual drugs, and it matched the path of the ship essentially.
So when you say they ended up in Denmark, did they end up in the Danish market, or did they end up?
No, they were dumped. They were dumped. The ship was on its way.
60 million quid's worth of coke.
Yeah, it was on its way to St. Petersburg, and there obviously had been, well, not obviously, but I mean, there had been an attempt to offload the drugs at sea, which didn't work. And there may have been more attempts as it made its way up to Denmark, but they were on the way to St. Petersburg carrying 40,000 tons of bauxite or something from Central America. So
they're all sort of similar cases, and similar maybe to the MV Matthew, which we do know a lot about because that case is completed. And that ship made its way across the Atlantic, and the plan was for smaller boats to go meet it and for it to take some of the cargo into the Irish market.
Yeah, you had what was the name of the ship? The Castlemore. Was the trawler that the 2 guys were trying to get out to meet the MV Matthew. And the weather got so bad, and they had to be rescued. And I think at that stage, the MV Matthew was already suspected as, had been alerted, and they made the mistake of coming too close into the Irish waters, and they were able to spring a trap essentially.
A lot of the guys they've picked up in regards to these cases, and going all the way back, I suppose, to the original when you had Martin Wandon, etc. on that lucky day, that boat it was a similar. The ribs went out to meet the lucky day, the catamaran. They transferred the bales of cocaine, and they were going to land it on to the Cork coast, I think, as well. Then, I mean, this is 30 years ago nearly, and of course there was a mix-up between diesel and petrol in the engines, the boats,
yes, and they all ended up in all the coke floating around Dunlock Bay. And
Martin wanted to
gave us the young offenders.
Yeah, gave us the young offenders. But I mean, it seems to be a modus operandi with the drug gangs. They have a mothership. They're crossing the Atlantic, they're coming into European waters, they're coming around the Irish coastline, and there's an arrangement made for another sort of cell structure to go out and to pick up the drugs. What does get successfully landed, you will then have, as you did with the lucky day, a third cell structure to collect it and move it on. And I think once they land it, they divvy it up. So is the chance of getting caught, even if they've, divided it, you know, an amount of 60 million, if you break that down into 6 different transport routes, you are reducing your risk all the time. The minute it lands, you're reducing your risk.
And you can see with some of these cases, like in some of the earlier court reports, we've heard about them, about all the equipment. And in one particular case, I mean, it was all the best of gear. And it was all, you know, apart from mini GPS trackers, there was, you know, all the proper weather gear and safety gear. You know, there'd been all the seafaring navigation equipment, like all of which is thousands and thousands of euro. And again, even the MV Matthew, the entire boat had been bought, the entire ship, like a bulk container had been bought by, you know, the cartel behind it. And, you know, it's unlimited resources are going into this.
Do you remember in 2010 when Operation Shovel happened and some of the intelligence came out that the Spanish police had been working on in the background? I think they had been, you know, listening in on the phones of some of the Kinahans and all the rest of it. But there was a suggestion at that stage that Christy Kinahan Sr. had suggested buying his own boat to cut out the transport costs. And it was like, it felt so ridiculous, didn't it?
Outlandish at that stage. But that's the way it's been shown since. That's the way he thinks in terms of, you know, I'd say he's been looking at trying to buy an airline.
And definitely not alone, given what's been happening of late. And of course, it's the most efficient way to move big bulk drugs across the globe and into Europe. The European market is still very lucrative for these cartels.
And it's people who keep buying it is causing the problem, really, essentially. I mean, the demand is just never ending. And I mean, you know, I only ever hear people complaining about there's so much drugs around, it's unbelievable. I've never heard anyone say, despite all these huge successes, that there's a lack of cocaine anywhere.
There doesn't seem to be any.
Like, no one's ever mentioned it to me that, God, we couldn't get any cocaine for the last couple of months or last couple of weeks. It's quite the opposite.
And of course, we got a glimpse as well, just in the same day, just from just dipping into the court, of what happens really on the ground when it comes to fighting within drug gangs and for turf and all the rest of it. And we're back to the story of Cian Mulready Woods, the teenager who was abducted in Drogheda by the late Robbie Lawler in January of 2020. And he was taken to a property where he was dismembered, and then his remains were scattered in various parts of both Dublin and I think
Drogheda. Yeah, it was 3 different locations. Like, we kind of in a couple of days after it, in January 2020 when it was found. Like, it was such a horrific crime. Like, I mean, it shocked all of us. I think, you know, it was like we're at a whole new level. Even, you know, it was quite the disturbing one. So
there was 2 guys in court yesterday, and they were for mention, was it?
Yeah, it was just a kind of I suppose, case management. And one of them was Stephen Carberry, who's charged with helping to dispose of the remains. And there was a trial date set for, I think, initially December, and that they just wanted another mention date on the 17th of November for various reasons. I think you know, it's just this trial management to make sure certain things are done or whatever. Yeah. And there was no great hurry, I think, in this particular one. And then you had also a man called Glenn Bride, who's been charged in relation again to the disposal of Cian Mulready Woods' body parts. And that's going to be listed again for the 20th of October, again for mention. So it's all, they're at the kind of the case management stage, going through it before, you know, a trial goes ahead.
There's quite a number of people prosecuted in relation to that.
Yeah.
And it's taken quite a while. I was surprised that it was still before the courts, but nonetheless, the remains, of course, were initially some of the remains, along with a pair of flip-flops, were dumped in a hold-all gym bag in Coolock. And later, there was a car found burning in Dublin, isn't that right? With some of the remains were in the boot. And then searches continued because the Gardaí believed that the intelligence was that this Cian Mulready Woods' head was going to be left up at Cornelius Price's compound in County Meath in Gormanston. Cornelius Price.
I think, they found it. There was a search in Rathmullen Park. I think it was in March 2020. His torso was found then.
Oh, his torso. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, and there are people who have already been jailed for part of that. You've had Paul Crosby, who's been given a 10-year sentence. And there was... I think Gerard Cruz was also before the Special Criminal Court as well, in connection with all that as well. He got a 7-year sentence. And there's other, I suppose, people lower down the chain as well, like, you know, made a property available and stuff like that, or a certain time as well.
It was during the case of when Paul Crosby pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years that actually Robbie Lawler was named as the killer. During that sentencing, Robbie Lawler had subsequently been killed himself in Belfast in April of 2020, and investigations are ongoing into his murder. But he was named as the killer. Like, I mean, he was the one who lured him to that property in Rathmullen and who killed him. And he was in such a chaotic time of his life, the end of his life. Of course, his brother-in-law, Richie Carberry, had been shot dead while he was in prison in the run-up to this. Lawler was released from prison, hell-bent on revenge, and had been attacked in Dublin outside a gym where some young lads, all connected to the criminal known as Mr. Big, had sort of roughed him up a bit, taken his gym bag, and then later posted videos and, you know, sort of taunts online, really, in his gym shoes. And this seems to have been the catalyst that resulted in Cian Mulready Woods' murder.
Yeah, I think wasn't there a flip-flops found with some of the body parts as part of a kind of a revenge taunt, I guess.
Such an extraordinary, sick story that it was hard to believe it had happened in Ireland at all.
But that was the thing that kind of struck me about, like, the Special Criminal Court would have been, you know, set up at a time when Ireland were facing an existential crisis, like with the IRA and, you know, the troubles going on in the north. And that we spent the day there yesterday and did a full business, and there was no armed dissident Republicans or anything like that. It's all people involved in drugs. And it's, you know, and when you're looking at, you know, the major importation stuff, you're talking about gangs who are probably have greater resources than the IRA ever did. It shows you how things have moved on and what's considered a threat to the state these days. And it's not coming from armed Republicans, it's coming from armed gangsters.
But indeed, most of the people that end up in the dock in the Special Criminal Court aren't the bosses. Sure, they're not. I mean, it's the odd time we'll see somebody who's there for directing a criminal organisation, but mostly, especially in the cases of the shipments, you find that there's this variety of people who have sometimes nautical backgrounds, sometimes they have previous convictions. They're kind of there. They're making money, aren't they? They're not.
Yeah, no, I mean, these guys are the tradespeople, I think, of the underworld. Like, not singling anyone out, but you'll find a lot of them will have experience of driving fast boats, or they'll be ex-military, or, you know, they'll have expertise in navigation. You know, they're coming with night sights and satellite phones. I mean, they're not people who are lightweight by any means. So, I mean, these are professional criminals, you know, albeit they're not, you know, kicking in doors and trying to shoot people in the head or anything like that, or selling on the street. They probably see themselves as being a cut above. I imagine there's an element of adventurism going out in the black and night to try and meet a boat on the high seas and, you know, and be smarter than the customs and the Navy and the guards and get it to, you know, its market, and you get a big fat paycheck. And it sounds like, you know, boy's own adventure kind of thing, but at the same time, it's, of course, it's fueling
it's the risk,
a nasty trade.
The drug, isn't it? And the risk.
I think so, yeah. There has to be. It's a lifestyle, I'd say, for some of these guys.
Okay, well, thanks a million, Eamon.
It was a pleasure, Nicola.